Well, Corey, there's a familiar voice to WBAI audience on the air. And how did you come in contact with Stanley?
Stanley Cohen is on the line now, and I'm grateful to him for coming on. Stanley, do we have you on?
You do. I'm listening to my brother with the thick brogue from Belfast up the Ra.
So
I know it well, do you?
I know it all too well. Ask Father Patrick Maloney.
Yeah, we've had him on.
I seem to have a memory of a movie I did one time called The Brinks Job, and I think there might be a connection there, my dear man.
Right.
Yeah. I did that case too, but I get around. It's been a while.
Is there anything you haven't done?
I haven't sold my soul to Julian Assange or to Glenn Greenwald.
Oh, good man yourself, yes.
So many WBAI listeners will recognize Stanley Cohen as I guess the phrase Stanley is always radical lawyer. Is that how you're always described? Yeah.
Listen, any lawyer who's not radical is simply a rubber stamp for the status quo.
Yeah.
So John had asked, and I reached out to you on kind of in my other job for the New York Times to talk to you, and and I had the notion to talk to John, say let's get him on because a lot of WBAI listeners would know you and have heard you before. So, you did a brief stint. And as John reminds me, it's only brief if you're not serving the stint. Well, it's easy for me to call it short. But in federal prison the government came after you for, I guess, tax evasion, right? And
No, not tax evasion. Impeding the IRS. I'm the only prosecution in the United States for 35 years for impeding the IRS.
Yes.
Isn't that right? Yeah.
That came on the heels of a almost decade-long investigation for material support for terrorism, which went nowhere, and then a 3-year investigation as part of a, quote, pot conspiracy in the Mohawk Nation. That went nowhere. So when all else failed, it went to the IRS, and the IRS charged me with impeding the IRS, as if it takes a lot to impede the idiots that run that fucking place.
Right. So, I mean, you've probably annoyed this various agencies of the U.S. government over your law career. Do you say this is a kind of payback for that, or they had you in their sights, or what?
Let's put it this way: the prosecutor who handled the case, who brought the case, was someone who I beat in a career-making federal case 20 years before, and as he stormed out of the courtroom, losing the case, opined for all to hear, I should have indicted you for it. The federal judge that ended up handling my case reached down to take my indictment, quote unquote, instead of it being wheeled out. They came after my practice, my family, my clients. So I guess the answer is, do I detect a wee bit of...
Did he drop off? Oh,
you're there, Stanley.
The powers that be. Maybe.
I think we're.
Well,
we'll have to call him back.
It was the IRS that got him last time. Now it's AT&T that got him this time.
I think we have an impeded.
Right. They just impeded. He impeded his conversation.
Yeah. It should be the URS, right? Unimpeded Revenue Service.
Yeah. Stanley, are you back?
I'm back.
Yeah.
You can see they're at it again.
Yeah, Stanley, you're going to have to watch your language. You're following in the footsteps of George Carlin. We had a dump there for a second. But listen, how were you treated when you were doing your time in the joint? I mean, how did the other prisoners treat you? And you truly were a jailhouse lawyer. And how did that work? And how many months did you do?
Well, listen, I did 10 months in a federal prison camp, where the day that I walked in, I was greeted by a half dozen former clients of mine.
And those were just the correction officers.
Yeah, that's right. The day that I walked in, the warden of the camp said, okay, we know who you are. We've already had 500 requests for interviews. So he said, are we going to have any situations here? And I said, you'll have none as long as I have none. And I'm not talking about inmates. As long as And I was at a camp that was a work cadre for probably the second or third worst, most deadly federal prison in the United States, in which 2 correction officers had died the year before, one murdered by a lover and the other who committed suicide. So, it was, listen, it is what it is. I've been indicted in 2 different countries, been in prison in 2 different countries. I've been arrested 6 times, and I'm banned by at least 2 states that we know of. So I'm it comes to you. It goes with the turf. I'm not worried.
Stanley, on Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman had on someone from Texas who voted, and she was a convicted felon, but she really believed she, voted legitimately, and she was just sentenced to 5 years.
Yeah, I know.
Now you're coming back, and you can get your law license, but can you vote?
Well, I got to tell you, the last time I voted on a federal election was 1972. I have voted historically for local issues. My law license, keep in mind, I was never contrary to the haters. I was never disbarred. I went to a federal prison camp for an offense that's not a crime in New York State. My license was suspended while I was either doing my 10 months or the year of post-supervised release. And then upon application, the court reinstated my license. In terms of voting, I'm not quite sure what the status is in terms of New York right now, but quite frankly, I see nothing popping up in New York State of interest to me, and I see nothing on the federal horizon which is of any more interest to me. I think
how about those local IDC elections, Stanley, with those Democrats voting Republican?
Well, listen,
in the state Senate. Does it? I mean, it's bad enough, being there, but I mean, to vote Republican, I think is an absolute disgrace.
Well, it's like the Orangemen in Belfast. What can I say? I mean, talk about disgrace.
Yes, that is true. Yeah.
The problem is that, what price thy soul, what cost thy freedom. Yeah. We have become very much a state and a time and a place that is locked into slogans.
Yeah.
We had the latest saving grace, Miss Ocasio praising with words normally set aside for Jesus, the passing of the great warmonger John McCain, which startled more than a few, and my response was, why are you startled?
Oh.
We've reached a...
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the only thing I say about that is that many people have died nobly in ignoble causes. And so that was an ignoble cause, but I think the fact that McCain did actually choose not to get his freedom when he could have, I think that was a pretty heroic thing. So that was noble.
Yeah. Having followed, challenged, observed from very up close a career of evil that well beyond, keep in mind, having done 23 bombing runs in Vietnam, largely destroying civilian homes, civilian property, and killing civilians. I mean, shit happens. But at the end of the day, if there's any doubt about who this person was, his 30-year record on intervention, on regime change, opposed to the ANC attack on apartheid, the list is endless. His blind support for Zionism, it goes on and on and on. This is someone, and look, it doesn't matter. He's passed. And, whatever comfort his family should get. But I am a firm believer, just like, I have never forgiven Ariel Sharon, that there are death may free people from today's encounter, but it leaves a lasting record. And I, for one, believe that warmongers and war criminals need to be recalled, if for no other reason, to hopefully serve as a lesson to the next generation.
Well, I think that the that accusation of anti-Semitism hangs over your head frequently, and at many times. And of course, they have the usual thing of the self-hating Jew, and so on and so forth, stuff like that. Of course, people don't realize that Arab and Jews are Semites. And so, therefore, when you defend folks who are not of the Jewish faith, that doesn't make you an anti-Semite. But how do you deal with that? How do you feel about being called that.
I think what aggravates the Zionists and the haters is, religion. I'm a direct descendant of Aaron and Moses, and if you follow biblical movies, neither one of them was allowed to go to the Promised Land because they were iconoclasts, because they challenged this selfish view and vision of what was to become, and were barred. Yeah. I don't divide the world into race, religion, flag, anthem, or oath. Principle and justice knows no such artificial divide. It's funny. I've been banned from Israel for over 10 years. Back in the day when the JDL did more than simply, call you, quote unquote, an anti-Semite, but threatened you and, in fact, attacked people and murdered people, 25 years ago, I was the subject of these attacks. The bottom line is you have to speak truth.
Yeah, yes.
People, fine.
That would have been Maya Kahana when he was the head of it.
Yeah, that whole crew. Yeah. But what I find most interesting is Ashkenazi Jews coming from Europe and Brooklyn accusing people of being anti-Semitic, who are the only Semites I know are people from MENA, are Arabs. Yeah. You may include some Sephardic Jews, but the specter of Ashkenazi Jews from Europe screaming anti-Semitism, they'd be better off screaming anti-Pole, anti-Brooklyn, anti-Hungarian. Yeah. But it is like Israel's attempt, part of the ethnic cleansing going on for decades in Israel is those 1948 so-called citizens, second-class citizens of Israel, are not referred to as Israeli Palestinians or Palestinian Israelis. They're referred to as Arabs. And it's not by accident. It's another step in trying to remove the reality of Palestinian existence, whether inside the occupation or out. So the bottom line is they can call me anything they want. The irony is that, there was a time when they debated me 15, 20 years ago. They got their asses handed to them over fact, not rhetoric. And ever since then, they've run a mile. There have been offers proposed that I do public debates with people like Dershowitz. He's run from it. From the Israeli ambassador, he's run from it. Horowitz, he's run from it. It's because, the whole Israeli, the doctrine, the whole debate, the whole fallacy, the whole myth is based upon screaming and shouting, but when you break it down to its core, to the facts on the ground, they lose.
Where would you, if, say, what they say, that it couldn't happen here, which it couldn't happen in Germany, that Hitler could have gotten where he got. Suppose it happened here. Where would you go for refuge? Where you?
Oh, I don't look. I'm not about refuge.
We all need some refuge from this.
That's fine. My view of refuge is that sort of like saying we establish certain states for Jews, certain states for Christians, certain states for Buddhists, as in, Myanmar right now.
Well, this notion of refuge. Hitler did set up places for Jews, concentration camps.
Well, they did, and they've also set up concentration camps for Palestinians called Gaza, and they've set up concentration camps for people in Rohingya, and they've set up concentration camps in dozens of places throughout history. The reality of it is the check on international violations of the check on genocide and ethnic cleansing, the check on occupation and apartheid is international law and international sanction. It's not refuge. Refuge empowers people to spew hate.
Well, regardless of anything, anyway, being Jewish, you must have been a victim or not a victim, but a victim of anti-Semitism in your life.
Well, of course. I mean, I remember as a young... Look, most of my family disappeared in Europe. My parents grew up as teenagers collecting money on street corners for Zionism in Israel. They learned in their long life to regret that step and to basically be sick over what had happened to Israel and the role of Zionism. Yeah. As a young man, as a young boy, I remember in Virginia driving past lawns that said no Jews, niggers, no Jews, niggers, or dogs. Yeah. I grew up in the specter of the McCarthy era, which was basically not just an attack on the left, but in particular an attack on Jews. Yeah. So I have a very clear and very precise understanding in history of what it is to be targeted because of your race, religion, your politics, your belief, and it is for that precise reason, like the thousands of Holocaust survivors in Israel who called 2014 genocide and who attack Israel for genocide directed against Palestinians. I'm going to stand united with my brothers and sisters wherever and whenever the ugly, destructive face of genocide raised its head. And in Israel, it has for more than 90 years. Beginning 20 years before the Nakba, the Irgun, the Stern Gang, Lehi, and other gangs unleashed this unprecedented then terrorist attack. We remember the King David Hotel. We remember the assassination of the Archduke of Scandinavia or Sweden, but we forget the bombings, the hangings, the killings, the slaughters of Palestinians and the British that went on for 20 years as part of the onset of the ethnic cleansing in Palestine.
And what do you Israel now, as it stands, is the home of many of Jewish people, really, essentially. Is it a refuge for Jews?
No. First of all, there are more Jews who live outside of Israel than inside of Israel. That's number one. Number two, the conflation of Zionism and Judaism, it's almost as if for 5,000 years Judaism was this fraternity waiting to be discovered by the Zionists 150 years ago, who were largely non-believers and secular Jews. Israel is a land that is built of ethnic cleansing, that has one of the most profound records of dispossession, of genocide, of ethnic cleansing directed at indigenous population. In fact, the greatest refuge for Jews in the world is home in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Now, if your question is where is this going, it's very simple. I've been saying for 20 years, and it's going to get there, and I believe in my lifetime. The only resolution is a one-state resolution. I really don't care what it's called, with full equal rights for all, one vote, one person, no official state religion, no double standard, no second-class citizenship, and where it goes, it goes. And if it ends up as it will, perhaps at some point, with a prime minister that is Muslim and Palestinian, so what? If it ends up with a progressive Jew, or even one who's not, who ends up as prime minister, so what? It's the only answer. It's just like South Africa. The other alternative of the two-state solution is long gone. It's been destroyed by Oslo. It's been stomped on by this administration and by the Palestinian Authority ever since Oslo.
Yeah, okay. Enough of this light chit-chat. Let's get to the meat of the matter here. Stanley, you officially have your license back? Are you back at work as a lawyer? Are you back in New York City, or what's?
Well, yeah, I'm still up in the mountains, primarily because 2.5 years ago I had a dog that I had to get her leg amputated because of cancer, and it's easier for her right now here. She's fine, though. I'm working on some international cases right now that I don't need to be in New York City. I'm working on a homicide case, Route 2, and some other cases that are going to require commuting, and I've done some commute. My plan is to come back to New York City, although it now looks like NYU. I mean, my old neighborhood, the Lower East Side. I was there 2 weeks ago. I thought I was, I thought I was at Dartmouth family reunion.
It's all over. New York is over. You knew that.
I mean, it's wild. I've even started looking outside. Someone's looking for a live workspace for me in Long Island City. What we used to call a studio with a rollout cot is now described as a $4,000 a month loft.
Yeah.
So my plan is to come.
Colin Quinn calls the L train. It's like a gondola in the Alps. Taking all the white people to go skiing between the Lower East Side and to Williamsburg.
Well, I got to tell you, I started my career in 1983 with the Legal Aid Society Criminal Defense Division in the South Bronx, and lived and worked there for almost 7 years. It was home sweet home. I loved it. I represented Larry Davis, and I was there when the Bronx was burning. A lot of high-profile cases. So I recently went to the South Bronx, figuring, all right, I'll find a place.
Yeah. No, you went to Sobro.
Sobro.
Yeah, I was stunned.
The uptown cousin of Tribeca and Nolita. Yeah.
I was stunned. I looked around and said, I'm praying for a drive-by shooting to duck.
Good. Stanley, do you ever do
just
like
to feel at home?
You got these internet, but do you ever do like a slip and fall on Queens Boulevard or anything like that? I mean, do you take anything normal?
Any ambulance chasing, or is it all Gaza and Osama bin Laden's son-in-law?
Yeah, no. I leave that for the up-and-coming kids. They can do those things.
Marvin
Although
Kornberg.
I must tell you, more than once, I almost got hit, and I slipped and hit in Queens Boulevard by the Kew Gardens courthouse. It's insane.
Yeah, the Boulevard of Death. Right.
Yeah. No, I leave that stuff for the newbies, for the kids. I've got a few other focused things to do. I'm working on I can't identify the parties right now, but I'm working on a potentially very explosive war crimes litigation somewhere in the Middle East. I recently was reached out to with regard to something pending in the ICC where I have been part of teams that have brought Israel before. I'm working on something with colleagues from South Africa. And it'll go where it goes. And
then you do a little bit of criminal work, more local criminal work. You just mentioned a homicide case. Well,
I got a murder case that's been reached out to me. I'm dealing with a huge credit card case right now. But who knows? We'll see. I'm just not sure. I had thought for a while I was going to relocate to the Middle East or the Gulf and teach. I had some offers, but I decided I've done a lot of writing the last 3 years. I've probably had almost 100 pieces published throughout the world, and I decided, I'm going to go do some teaching, I think, for a while. And then I walked into a courtroom about 2 weeks ago with my beard down to my belly and my hair all over the place, and I walked out winning with the judge laughing at me, and I said, fuck, the heck with that teaching. I said, I got to stay in the battle, so...
Yeah.
All right, and that's Stanley Cohen, and I have a feeling you're going to be hearing his voice in the very near future here on WBAI. Stanley, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for the invitation. Up the Rada, my brothers.
Oh, my God. That 10 months really tempered his politics being in the joint there.
Right.
It really it calmed him down pretty much.
Really quietened him.
Right. He learned his lesson.